So hi, it's Fiona from Adventures in Paint and the Adventurous Painters program here, for those of you who don't know me. And I want to talk in this video about style and about shape. And it's a question I often get asked, and it's come up time and time again on the Adventurous Painters courses that I've been running. People asking me or asking the group, do I have a style? Or saying I don't think I have a style, or I don't recognise my style of painting. And it's been really interesting because invariably people come back in the group saying, but I'd recognise your paintings everywhere, anywhere. You do have a style. And yet people often don't seem to recognise it in themselves. So I have been in my studio this morning thinking about this. I've been getting out some paintings that I haven't looked at for a while, having a bit of a clear out in my studio. It's a really foul February day here in the UK. The rain is absolutely lashing down and it's freezing cold. So I've been pottering, getting out lots of my paintings, putting them out and sort of reflecting on this and thinking about my own style. And thinking about whether my paintings kind of look like they belong to each other. How do they work as a group? It's quite a nice exercise to do, just getting stuff out, getting your own work out and having a look and thinking about my own style. And I think it's really interesting. I mean, I think that we all do have an innate style in our painting. And I think it's very much like handwriting. I mean, we learn to write at school, we're taught a particular handwriting style. You know, we adopt some of that, but ultimately our handwriting always comes back to being our own. And I think it's just the same with painting. And I think it's a lot to do with just how our hand and our arm likes to move. And also I think it's a lot to do with pace, whether we're fast or whether we're slow, whether we do something that's quite meticulous and tidy or something that's more exuberant and loose. So I think however much we practice and we learn and even try and adopt another artist's style, you know, it can be a really good way of learning, but ultimately we'll always come back to something that's our own repertoire. And certainly on the Adventurous Painters courses that I run, it's very much a part of the kind of philosophy of those courses is about helping you to find your own style, helping you to recognise and embrace what comes naturally to you in your style of work, helping you to recognise that, recognise what you enjoy, what comes naturally to you, and play to your strengths. So I think our style is very much to do with the marks that we naturally make. It's to do with what we enjoy seeing, and it's to do with how we enjoy applying paint. You know, just the pure pleasure of what we enjoy doing with paint will keep coming through time and time again in our style of working. But I've also particularly today, and I wanted to talk in this video about shape because I think it's a really interesting one. I think we also have a repertoire, many of us, of shapes that we will find ourselves coming back to time and time and again in our work. And this is also what makes up our style of painting. So I was just thinking as I was looking at my paintings about some of the shapes that I really enjoy using and coming back to. I really like this sort of, I don't even know what you call this shape, but it's my sort of gemstone shape. I've been playing around with paintings based on gemstones. Some of the crystals that I've picked up on some of my little explorations into the world of gemstones and crystals. And I really like, there's another shape I use a lot, which is a sort of double sort of circle. It's like a bump. I call my bump shape. It keeps coming back again and again in my work. It's here in this one. Just a little hint, little glimpse of a kind of bump shape. I also, the opposite of that, the negative shape of that is a kind of notch. So I often use this kind of notch shape coming in. It's even used here where I've popped a triangle in and created a bump here. Sometimes I'm doing a big line through my work with a pastel or a crayon and it might come through again as it does in this one. You may or may not be able to see this, but this kind of knot shape. So what are your shapes? What are the shapes that you find keep appearing in your work time and time again? What is your particular kind of repertoire? I often refer to it as as motifs. We will have a set of motifs that keep reoccurring in our work. It's really interesting. I was also just reflecting on the I think what comes through in some of my work is some of the very early kind of learning I did around art, some of the courses I did. I think the Bauhaus School of Art and Architecture that was around in Germany in the 1920s fed into some of the teaching that I kind of learned from. Because I was thinking back to one of the principles that was explored by the Bauhaus School, which was about the idea that good composition, good design often includes the square, the circle and the triangle. And if you think about those three shapes, they do work really well together because they're all sort of similar but different. And if you think about the very simplest drawing a child might do of a house with a sun, you've got those three shapes, the square of the house, the triangle of the roof, and the circle of the sun. So it's a really good basic combination of shapes to come back to. Something you might like to think about in your work. How am I creating squares, circles, and triangles in my work? And I'm often thinking about that just, both in the shapes that I use, but also in how I arrange those shapes. So in this painting, I've used a lot of circular shapes that kind of create an interesting kind of pathway through this painting. In this one, I've got my square, I've got my triangle, and I've got my circles. This is a really good kind of winning formula for a good composition, is to think about these three shapes. Sometimes shapes will appear more subtly in the way that we arrange things in a painting, and that's something else we can think about when we're thinking about composition and this kind of juggling act that we have to do, this kind of puzzle that we have to solve of how to arrange things on the painting surface so that they look good. So sometimes I'm thinking about how I can bring a triangle in. And in this piece, and I don't know how easily you can see this because I've not got the whole of it showing very well, but I've got a triangle. It's very subtle, but I have got a triangle appearing if you joined up. Sometimes it's about how if we join shapes up, they create a shape. So I have got a triangle in this painting appearing. In this one, this crystal one, it might not be very obvious on camera, but I suddenly noticed that a square was appearing where my edges were joining up. So I just played with that, just how I could accentuate it. It's very subtle, but the viewer of this painting will pick that up, even if it's very subconscious. And a shape within a shape can be really nice in a composition. So a circle within a square, or a square within a square can be really interesting. So it has appeared in that one. So shapes and how we arrange them. Big shapes and small shapes, different types of shape. If you're in the Adventurous Paint group and that's where you're picking up this video, then do share your thoughts on this and do share your work, or even have a go at making work that uses these simple shapes, the circle, the triangle and the square. And it is something we work with a lot on the Adventurous Painters courses that I run. Depending on when you're picking this video up, I'm starting my next course soon on the 29th of February this year, 2022. And there'll be another course running in the autumn. And this course that's coming up is about landscape. It is about thinking about the outdoor environment. And we're going to be thinking a lot about how the landscape can be divided up into interesting zones or shapes. and we're going to be doing quite a lot of work thinking about, a lot of exploring, thinking about how we can create balance, how we can create interesting, good-looking compositions that are balanced and satisfying to look at. And there are some really good tips and tricks that we can come back to in thinking about how we can make compositions work really well. So if you want more information about the course or any of my courses, head to my website, fionagodfreyart.com, have a look at what I'm doing. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have a bit of a play with some collage. It's a really good way to play with design, composition, arrangement and shape. And I'm just going to have a little play with that now. So collage is a great way to play with composition, and I like to make painted collage papers and cut them up to play with for this. It's a great thing to just play with, take photographs, or even stick things down, photocopy them, and then play around, have multiple versions that you can play around with if you've got a photocopier printer. So my square, my triangle, and my circle, these three basic shapes that the Bauhaus teaching suggested were a good basis for composition, and they do look really nice together, don't they? There's something that works about them together. And I'm thinking of a piece by the artist David Nash, the UK sculptor who makes big chainsaw wooden pieces, and he made a piece called I think it's sphere pyramid cube, I can't remember the order now, but where he made lovely big charcoal drawings and then the corresponding three-dimensional sculptures, the sphere, the cube and the pyramid. So even just with these three simple shapes, these three basic shapes, there's just so much we can do playing around and thinking about the different qualities of these shapes. The circle, I always think, feels like something very contained that we can kind of land into. Squares create something much more grid-like. Triangles are they can often be used to create direction in a painting. They sort of point us. We can think about just how we can use these simple shapes, repeating them to create interesting designs. Or variations on one. So let me find, I've got lots of variations of the circle here. Various curvy shapes. I've cut some of my shapes that I know I like. This sort of double circle that I like, my sort of bumps. This teardrop shape is a shape I really like using. So it's quite fun to play around with some of your favourite shapes, motifs, collage, great for adding paint, playing around and then adding line. Something we're going to do on the on the Adventurous Painters courses is using collage and then thinking about adding to collage to create designs. And then I was just having fun just thinking about how our eyes read shapes as landscape, how the landscape is made up of shapes and how easy and quick it is to use bold shapes to create a sense of landscape, and just playing with what's possible, thinking about different kinds of landscape and what different shapes suggest. You just play. With what shapes can do. Thinking about weather. All my dark pieces here. What kind of landscapes are you seeing? Here's a nice piece. This creates a circle, but it's where a circle has been cut out. Nice for sort of suggesting a bay, a harbour, beach. So, well worth having a play with collage. And if you're in the free Adventures in Paint group, my Facebook group, do share work that you've made. Share your thoughts about shape and style and about the shapes that you enjoy using. And yeah, I look forward to seeing some of your pieces and your thoughts. And if you have a play with collage, you might like to share those too.